The dust has finally settled on a juicy Stanley Cup final, but it has huge implications for your upcoming fantasy hockey draft prep, and we'll break it all down for you on today's show.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Another year in the books officially, my fantasy fanatics, and welcome back inside the lab to your daily source for fantasy hockey, NHL news, and all of the betting breakdowns that you need. And even though those betting breakdowns are now on pause, Steele, until September, at least, there is a whole lot more that we're going to continue to cover here 5 days a week until we hit that summer stretch. Steele and I will continue to break down everything that you need to put in the pocketbook to dominate your upcoming drafts. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Steele, before I turn it over to you, shout out to the everydayers holding us down and making us their first listen every single day. Right now, it might seem like the time to let your foot off the brake, take your finger off the pulse, however you want to break it down. But I implore you to not, because I know you do this, Steele, and it's worked out to success and money in your pocket. When mans are slipping, that's when you do even more research. You stay tapped to the pod. Florida Panthers, though, they take out the Edmonton Oilers. There's fantasy fallout. How are you feeling about this final? You and I haven't spoken in a few days. Take it away, my friend. I got a number of stats to hit you with, but what are you feeling after yet another dominant performance from this Florida Panthers club?
Well, number one, it was probably the best Stanley Cup Finals that we've seen in a very long time. And there have been quite a few over the last decade, but from what you hear online, of course, the banter and chirping between both these teams, it's absolutely ruthless out there like you wouldn't even imagine. So that's off the top right there. Something that I like to hear is the mentality in the Stanley Cup Finals. But it begs the question here from the Florida Panthers, are they a dynasty? Is this a dynasty in the making, or are they already one? Because they've been in the Stanley Cup Finals now 3 consecutive years. Of course, lost to the Vegas Golden Knights in year one, and they just went back-to-back against the Edmonton Oilers. So in my opinion, they are a dynasty. To me, this is reminiscent of the early 2010 Chicago Blackhawks and that team and the run that they went on for, 4, 5, 6 years even. So I look at this team, and there's going to be a lot of juggling in the offseason because they have 3 guys that they're most likely only going to be able to bring back 2 maximum in Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, and Aaron Ekblad. And that's also what I want to talk about later in this first segment of this episode is what happens with those 3 guys and how much would you pay them? But what are your thoughts overall on the Stanley Cup Finals, the Panthers going back-to-back, and are they a dynasty?
I think first and foremost, I got to show some love to the Edmonton Oilers just super quickly because I think today's episode will be focused on the Florida Panthers and what's going on with them.
We'll talk about the Oilers, though.
Okay, giddy up then. We'll talk about the Florida Panthers first. Just impressive. And my mind immediately goes to Bill Zito. You and I like to throw love to GMs out there. This guy is not only kind of fun to listen to and fun to watch, he has operated this team with absolute finesse and, surgeon-like precision. So I don't think anyone out there could have ever thought that bringing in Brad Marchand and injured Brad Marchand at the free agent deadline, the trade deadline, was going to work out like this. So number one, kudos to the Florida front office. Number 2, kudos to our boy Paul Maurice behind the bench. The best coach in the NHL. We've been talking about it. We've thrown out John Cooper's name. We've thrown out some others. This is the guy you want pushing the buttons for you behind the bench. Credit due to him. And let's just talk about it on the ice for a sec. This Florida Panthers team is so difficult to play against. You've got the 2 best players on the planet on the other side of the rink, arguably, and it didn't even matter. It wasn't even close in the end, Steele. And I think what you're going to see now is a lot of clubs try, and why wouldn't they, to mimic what the Florida Panthers have done because, yeah, this is a team game, and you've always heard that, but now it's really holding true. And I think there is some fantasy angles to be had here for next season. I'm intrigued to hear your take on the Oilers side of things, the Trent Frederick signing, what he means next year. Let me turn it back to you with this. Aaron Ekblad made 7.5 this year. Brad Marchand, 6.1. Sam Bennett, 4.4. Of those three players, if you had to pick one to leave, like you see them leaving, who is it for you? Because I have one, and I don't think it's the one you're thinking of, because I have a feeling that there are a lot of teams out there hungry for a guy like Sam Bennett. Does he want to leave? I don't know. But I could see a team even like Utah needing a pillar of a successful kind of a player making a run at this guy. I just don't know. Who do you see returning to Florida? Because there are some impacts on their fantasy value if they go elsewhere.
Look, from what I saw, I believe the Florida Panthers have around 17 or 18 million dollars of cap space going in the offseason. I have it here somewhere. Let me just pull it up. But they have some cap space. And there's three guys, Ekblad, Marchand, and Sam Bennett, like we just said. And to me, Bill Zito's comments already about trying to keep Brad Marchand and him going out and buying a Dairy Queen, that is so
I love that.
perfect and laughable. Like, it's so funny to me. So, look, they're looking to re-sign him. I think Sam Bennett's going to get a massive payday, whether it's in Florida or somewhere else. I think he wants to be in Florida. They have 19 million of cap space going in the offseason. So, if Sam Bennett gets somewhere around 9 or 10 million, which is possible, I don't know if Florida would be able to do it. Plus Brad Marchand at maybe 7 or 8 million for 3 years, which I've seen floating around out there. The odd person out here, the odd person out is Aaron Ekblad. I think he's the one that goes to free agency and he signs somewhere else because they brought in Seth Jones. He's signed for the next, 4 or 5 years now under Florida.
Sounds about right.
So he's under contract at 7 million. Yeah, he's under contract until 2029, 2030 season.
Yep.
So they've got the right shot, big defenseman. He played the most amount of minutes for them, over 25 and a half minutes of average ice time in the playoffs. I think Aaron Ekblad is the odd man out here. I think he goes to free agency and somebody else signs him for probably around 8 million, 8.5. He's 28 years old still has a lot of his prime. There have been some injury concern, and obviously this is a 20-game suspension. That's the guy I'm looking at to go in free agency and sign somewhere else.
Sam Bennett, just quickly, these stats, not just this year that this guy's been getting it done, Steele. And I think one of the angles that you and I cover that comes to playoffs, to fantasy value, and we've said it a lot, is don't let good performances in the playoffs overinflate what you do with a player come your draft time. This isn't just 1 year that's overinflating anything. Sam Bennett, 2 years ago, on their en route to the Cup final, 15 points in 20 games. Last year, 14 points in 19 games, and then this year, 22 and 23, and wins the Conn Smythe. You should be paying attention to this player if you weren't already. To me, though, Steele, if he goes somewhere else and he has to be a little bit more of that guy, and he's not allowed to play with that passion that he has because he has more responsibility to the team as a leader, as a guy who's making a whole crap ton of money, we might be talking about him a little bit differently in terms of where you draft him if he's not going back to the juggernaut of the Florida Panthers. Wanted to throw that out there. I have a number of intriguing stats, depth scoring, back-to-back, comeback cats, all of the things that you want to hear about this historically good Florida Panthers team. We'll talk about the Edmonton Oilers. We'll talk about some more fantasy fallout right after the break. And make sure you guys keep it tapped. Steele and I will be here the rest of the next couple of weeks, continuing our NHL-wide top 5 fantasy targets on every single squad. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. The Stanley Cup Finals, they're over, but you can always find tickets to your favorite event at Game Time, making you get to the events that you need even easier. Zone deals, deep discounts, panoramic seat views, all-in pricing with no hidden fees. All of the ticket price drops closer to the game that you're trying to attend, and you never overpay with Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets today with Game Time. Steele and I love it. Concerts, comedy, theater, and of course sports, anything near you. It's Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip, you were just reaming off a bunch of stats about Sam Bennett and his postseason over the last couple of years. He's done the exact same thing in the regular season as well. He's been so consistent. He's pretty much he is a 20-plus goal scorer. I know he had 16 in 63 games 2 seasons ago, but obviously missed 20
calling
games
that 25.
Yeah, we're calling that 25, at least 20, probably 25. But over the last 4 years, 20-plus goal scorer, 40-plus points. Just had a career year of 51 points in 76 games. He's a Banger League beauty, gets 90 penalty minutes, 100 last season as well, over 150 hits. He's had somewhere between 190 to 240 shots as well over the last 4 seasons.
Yeah.
He probably had one of the biggest upticks in fantasy value this past year. His pre-rank on Yahoo was 123rd. He finished the season ranked 35th overall on Yahoo. So major jump in his value for fantasy hockey leagues. Again, depends on the format, but especially for our leagues, the categorical ones where we look at the peripherals, he's an absolute star out there. And yeah, I think, you might be right. Maybe if he does sign somewhere else, let's say in Utah, or maybe goes out west somewhere else, maybe that does, factor into where his ADP would be at. And we'll have to dive into that obviously around July 1st in the first week of free agency. I think no matter where he goes, he's still the same player. He's still the same guy. It doesn't matter what team he plays for. He's still going to have that same dog mentality of, I'm going to run you through this wall and I don't care what happens to you on the other side. I'm going to go hard to the net. I might run into your goaltender, but you're not going to do anything about it. That's what we hate about him. That's what we love about him in fantasy hockey when he's on your team.
Yes.
I think he's going to be a star next year, and he will probably slide down the board, but I think this is a player you want on your team. You're going to circle him, and if he's somewhere in that 6th or 7th round, I'm jumping all over it.
Yeah, I only would see him sliding if he does move cities. If not, I could see him even moving upwards quickly. Before we get to Edmonton or whatever else you want to get to, the Panthers become the first franchise in 33 years to win their first 2 cups consecutively, the 7th in NHL history. Islanders won 4, Penguins 91 and 92, Oilers, Flyers, Red Wings, and way back in the 20s, the original Senators. Take this stat in though, Steele. The Panthers, 19 unique goal scorers, becoming the 6th Stanley Cup winning team in history with that many. The Blues back in 2019 had 20. This team, you and I throw out fantasy goldmine, this team must be. They have to be considered a fantasy goldmine because I still see, depending on what happens in this offseason, but guys like Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, on streams, Evan Rodriguez, you and I talk about him on waiver wire. Does he go ice cold and then hot? For sure. But when you have a team so responsible at both ends of the ice, and then they're anchored by Bobrovsky, you want a whole bunch of them, most definitely, and next year is no exception. Bob in the cage. I think, too, losing Ekblad for sure makes the most sense. You still have Forsling, sensational. Bring in Seth Jones, Mikkola. You could bring Nady Schmidt back on a cheap deal. He's a UFA. They're going to be fine on the blue line. They're going to be fine up front. And if this team isn't knocking on the door as one of the best in the East once again, I will be completely flabbergasted. They are a dynasty. Last one for you. They also beat the higher seeded team, whether that's accurate or not in terms of quality, every single round. Steal. Tampa, Toronto, Carolina, and Edmonton, all were the higher ranked team. This is the best squad in the NHL for a reason. Lots of fantasy fallout to be had here. Not so pretty in Edmonton. What's your take with the Oilers? Because when did you and I start doing this? 3 or 4 years ago now. One of the first episodes you said to me, you're like, Flip, because I think I was trying to spin you positively on Mike Smith for a week or two, and how the Oilers, you're like, Flip, stop. They'll never win anything with Mike Smith. You were right. Stu Skinner started going in. You're like, Flip, they will not win anything with Stu Skinner. They've come close, Steele, but you've been right. And unless they undress this goaltending, I really don't care what else happens. They are not going to be good enough. And case in point, a team like Florida, enough said.
Look, that's the number one thing that comes to my mind about this Edmonton team is the goaltending. And it stayed true throughout the entire postseason. They had to go back and forth between Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard pretty much the entire postseason. And even though Calvin Pickard had a 7-1 record, he had an 886 save percentage with a 2.58 goals against average. Stuart Skinner was not any better. He was 7-7. He had an 889 save percentage with a 2.99 goals against average. I would be absolutely shocked if the Edmonton Oilers brought back both these goaltenders. I'm not saying they can't keep one, but I would be so surprised if they don't hit free agency trying to make a trade for a goaltender or just signing a goaltender. They need someone else in between the pipes. They will not win with Stuart Skinner or Calvin Pickard. And I know there have been times, which we have seen over the last 5-7 years, of goaltenders, kind of, tearing it up in the postseason. Aiden Hill is a great example.
Yeah.
Darcy Kemper is a great example with his time in Colorado. There are times when a goaltender gets hot and he just becomes that number one guy and then, again, just moves forward, which has happened for those two guys. Stuart Skinner is not in the same ballpark. He's not in the same tier. I love the guy. I'm rooting for him, but he's not one that is going to win you a Stanley Cup. So I'd be surprised if both goaltenders come back next year. I know they're both under contract. That's number one. Number two, what do you do with Connor? I mean, obviously you want to re-sign him. Like you're going to pay, you're going to throw everything you can at him. Of course. But does he stay in Edmonton? Does he want to continue down this route of, again, just like getting his teeth rocked in every Stanley Cup Finals? The last 2 years, it's been heartbreaking.
It's been heartbreaking, no doubt. They were very close a season ago. And, a lot of, I don't want to get overly negative because I think it's also as Toronto-based. Look, you grew up down the street basically from where McDavid used to play his hometown hockey. Shout out to Newmarket, Ontario. By the way, shout out to Holland Landing, Sam Bennett. Shout out to Northern Toronto in general. We see you.
Sir. Yes,
That's
sir.
our backyard, baby, and we got to show love. However, I want to, dream big still and see him go elsewhere. I don't really see it. I think he'll return to Edmonton, and I know a lot of people are making a whole lot of his comments. Give the guy a couple of days. I think he will return to Edmonton still. I guess there's just so many questions. And when I look at this team over the last couple of years, and this ties directly to fantasy value because they have been such a good team on the power play this postseason. And I know these are skewed because, these stats carry over to a lot of teams that were only in for a round. They finished with the 5th best power play in the postseason. And then when you look at the Florida Panthers clamping down on the penalty kill, I guess what I need to say is Connor McDavid needed to be better, and he wasn't. And headed into next season, fantasy-wise, there's no correlation here. He's still the number 1 pick, and if you're going McKinnon first, no problem. He's the number 2 pick. What do they do with the rest of the roster, though? You alluded to it in the cage because – here, I'll bring this up. And this is why I'm glad we don't have to do the Edmonton Oilers top 5 yet. And even though it'll probably be pretty similar even after they make moves in July 1, I think this team has to be active, right? They got to be desperate. Throw them into the group of a whole bunch of other teams that have to get gritty in this offseason. Take in Evan Bouchard, RFA. Jeff Skinner, likely gone, UFA. Klingberg, UFA. Corey Perry. Kapanen. Connor Brown. All of these really important depth pieces, this team might look a whole lot different still come training camp. And then I think we'll be able to more properly assess every other fantasy piece not named Leon or Connor. Then we can maybe have a better grip on this squad. Gut-wrenching if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan. Let's talk about it a little bit more after the break. I got a couple of takes for you, and then we'll get back to our NHL-wide top 5 breakdown.
Evan Bouchard is what I want to talk about after the break real quick. What will his next contract be? Let's talk about it after the break of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Smash that subscribe button. follow button, and leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steel Road. And real quickly, Evan Bouchard, like you said, restricted free agent. He's probably looking somewhere in the ballpark of 10 million. That would be my assumption.
Sure, 9 to 10, yeah.
And that, again, that's going to be hard because, like you just said, they've got Darnell Nurse, 9.25 million, Ekholm, 6 million, Draisaitl, 14 million. McDavid's next contract is going to be upwards of 15 million.
More.
Like, this is going to be a tough spot for Edmonton. They only have 11.9 in cap space this offseason. Obviously, Bouchard's most likely the top priority because he's not under contract. They still got one more year on McDavid. But what would you be willing to pay Bouchard? And also, would you see a possibility of some other team maybe offer sheeting him?
Oof. The offer sheet, I think, is going to be an angle that really spices up this July 1 window. We've been kind of teeing that up, and I think
we're
it
going
might
to see that more frequently.
Yeah, an absolute onslaught of NHL news. What's intriguing to me here is this Trent Frederic deal as well, that they've just inked him to, long term. And I know it's not a ton of value per year. You know, I think it's 3.5 per.
Is it 8 years though? 7 years?
I think it's 8 years. 8 years for this deal, I believe. Anyway, that's what I'm seeing. Resign 8 years, 3.5 to 4 mil AAV. If that's an indication of what happens in this postseason or in this offseason, I think we are in for a real show. In terms of what I'll pay Evan Bouchard, I think you kind of have to give this guy his money, and I know things haven't worked out, and I understand that he has had serious lapses in defensive judgment. If you want to talk about fantasy-wise, Steele, this guy still brings it. I'd be fine paying him the money that is going out there. I think we're hearing around the 9 mark. Hit me with your take on this, though, because, and not to get away from Bouchard, but Trent Frederic, right? 2 years ago, 40 points, 70 penalty minutes, 204 hits, 123 shots on net. If somehow this guy squeaks onto a power play unit next year with McDavid and Draisaitl, and he maybe runs it back a little bit in terms of that 40 to 50 point performance that he can perhaps put up, this is a player that I really think could be a sleeper. I might be overthinking things, and it might be the heat getting to me. I guess all I want to leave it at is some teams that you and I have spoken about, regardless of what happens in the offseason, you're going to lock in. We just said fantasy goldmine in Florida. I don't think I can throw out fantasy goldmine with this team, and I know they have the 2 studs and Bouchard up there. But after that, until we see what shakes out with this roster, I would be a little bit more careful with anyone outside of those top 3.
I think the heat is affecting you because I don't see Trent Frederic even seeing a lick of power play one time. The only chance he has of getting on the first power play unit is if Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Evander Kane don't show up for the game that night. Those guys will be on the first power play.
It is the heat. Thank you.
I don't even know if he'll be on the second power play unit for that matter. So
you ever heard of injuries, Steele? Okay, see, this is why we do it together. You got to rate me back in, baby.
I've heard of injuries. I think Trent Frederic has heard of injuries as well. If you look at,
I think my brain might have an injury, and that's okay.
Having a heat stroke over there, but I got you. I'll bring the snow cones to cool you down. Look, for me, I'm not a huge fan of the deal. I think, it is what it is. He's only 26 years old, 27 years old. He'll be with them till he's 35 potentially. It's a good deal at what you said, $3.5 million per year. Yeah. So it's fine for now. I think he's going to bring that edge that they're most likely going to lose from a guy like Corey Perry if he chooses not to resign there. He's had 2 good years. Sorry, he's had 1 good year. He's had one good year. 40 points, 204 hits in the full 82 game season. Has clearly struggled the last 2 years. Or in the last year, 15 points. The injuries had 18 points. Yeah, for sure. Injuries again. So it is what it is to me. I don't think Trent Frederic's a draftable player. I think he's more of a streaming option.
I'm just trying to bring up angles, pal. Thank you very much. Doing. Yeah. Anyway, it was a great series, right? At the end of the day, I think what we're also looking forward to is turning the page on this last season and taking a look ahead at what could be for this upcoming fantasy draft season. now that you and I have also gotten through that kind of bottom 10 or 12 teams in the NHL, make sure you guys stay tapped in, because I think we're about to hit a whole bunch of teams that are really going to bring you some value. And then July 1 Steel, this is your source. We'll be breaking it all down for you guys.
We're also going to have to break down all the new signings that have happened over the last couple of days. Matt Duchene staying in Dallas. They only have $500,000 of cap space. What do they do with Jamie Benn, Mikael Granlund, and Jason Robertson still in trade rumors? We're going to have to break that down over the next week as well. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button. For your second listen, please check out the Locked On NHL podcast, doing wonderful things, of course. Like always, make sure you're staying tuned in for tomorrow's episode. Friday, we're getting after it.
Peace.